That's a rocket.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us again. My name is Keith Brooks. Welcome to another episode of Your Guest is as Good as Mine, the show where I invite my talented friends on and try to absorb their talent through osmosis and by proxy. And speaking of talented friends, I am so fucking excited today for the guest that we have from Winter Park, Florida originally, then moved to Chicago, then became a guru of film and television, Emmy award-winning director. You know him from Robot Chicken, from Moral Oral, one of my favorite television series of all time, Titan Maximum, 2 weeks, 1 year, The Tomorrow War, and the upcoming releasing today as we're filming this, Renfield. Oh my God, Chris McKay, also the director of one of my favorite movies of all time, the Lego Batman movie, and the co-director of the Lego movie, but probably most important, the voice of Larry the barista.
That's
Chris,
right.
how are you doing today, man?
That is an incredible introduction, Keith. Thank you very much. It was very all-encompassing. I really appreciate it. Going all the way back to Winter Park, Florida. That's really nice.
Yeah, I try to do my research just to impress you. You know what I mean? But I want to thank you for coming to me on this, the day of your film's release. I can think of no better time to do this.
Our film's release.
I'm honored to be a part of it. But that brings me to my first question for you. This has been a whirlwind. You are literally everywhere. I see Renfield posters on television all the time, on my computer, when I close my eyes at night. How does that feel?
TSA bins, inexplicably, and TSA bins.
That was amazing. I didn't know the TSA advertised movies.
My question is that who when they pay for that, where does that money go? Does that money go to the government? Like who is reaping the rewards of advertising the TSA bins? That's a rabbit hole we should try to figure out.
And I also want to know, like, what is the thought process behind it? We want people to think of our movie while they put their laptops away before they get frisked. Like, what is that?
Honestly, what I think it is people. I mean, people going through the TSA line, seeing this advertisement in there, taking a picture of it, and then uploading that on the internet, going, "What the fuck is there a movie advertised?" Because that's all I see is people just like gobsmacked by the fact that there's a movie being advertised to them at the bottom of their TSA bin. So I think it has to be like I think it's as simple as that. It's just people are just floored by that and take a picture of it and put it up online.
But any publicity, I suppose, is good publicity.
That's right.
And so, how are you dealing with this onslaught of all the publicity? I know you're doing screenings, you're doing EPKs, you're doing all sorts of stuff. How is it treating you right now?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's fun. I mean, it's fun to talk to people about this movie because the movie is a fun ride. The reason why I wanted to do this is because I thought that the script had a real cockeyed point of view on Dracula. Dracula's a character we've seen done a million times before, and we've seen kind of, for the most part, been done in very similar ways. Obviously there's been some that are different, but in general, and the idea of like resurrecting a character like Renfield, a character that's kind of obscure and kind of seeing Dracula through the lens of like a toxic workplace thing just seemed like a lot of fun. And to be able to do it in a, kind of a Mario Bava, Basil Gogos sort of color palette and shoot New Orleans and go crazy with like the over the top, action scenes and gore. And yet at the same time, like make it about someone who's dealing with a narcissist, someone who it has to overcome that. You get to go through his redemption from a guy who's helping Dracula murder people to a guy who's turning the tables on Dracula, and be able to work with Nick Holt. Honestly, when I read that script, the only way I saw this movie working is if we hired Nick Holt, and I didn't see any other way of doing it because he's got so many tools as an actor, and he's so versatile, and he's unafraid to be not cool, unafraid to be unlikable, do unlikable things as a character, or start, deep down in unlikability area, or strange or weird or slightly, I'm not sure if I, want to go with this guy, but he's so, as an actor, and this is something I'd be curious as, to hear from your side of things. But I find Nick to be so unguarded, and so like he's got no walls. There's no cynicism. He's completely open. You see a lot going on in his eyes. I mean, I probably stayed in close-ups too much, just because I really found him to just be so, to just be able to watch the movie through his eyes, through Cage's eyes, and what they were both doing. They're so expressive in their faces, but Nick was just, he's just guileless, right? Like he's just like, and I think that makes him I think, because he is so open, even when he's playing these characters, and you see a lot of complicated things going on behind his eyes, you want to root for him.
Absolutely.
You want him to succeed, and he, just because I think he's got that thing that people really want to care about him and want to take care of him and want him to become the best version of himself. And he's got an incredible charm, and he does his own stunts, and he's like there's so many good things to talk about Holt, and but yeah, I don't know, for me, that's that's kind of why I wanted to do this movie in the first place.
Well, I think that's, to piggyback off that about Nick Holt. I don't think I've ever seen an actor work as hard as he does. And there's something so sincere about everything he's giving you at all times that you just believe him no matter what. And
Yeah.
I think we're very similar in the sense that we're both just very attractive men, but also we both have like an affinity for nerdy things. And Hitchcock, and I grew up loving the Universal classic monster movie. So even being a part of this was a thrill, but we were on set at a certain point, and Nick comes around the corner and he starts doing the Dwight Fry laugh. And it just, like, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, because I'm like, that is brilliant. That was a beautiful incorporation. And then I broke him with a improv line, and that was the happiest day of my life. But still, but
which people will be able to see on the Blu-ray, because we put a bunch of you and Josh riffing on some things on the Blu-ray, because both of you guys did a really great job. You guys were really wonderful, and you brought a lot of really fun stuff. I wish that we could have used. It's a shame to not be able to use some of that stuff in the movie.
But you have so much fun stuff in the movie to begin with, and so much complicated things. And I think this is one of the points I want to get to you about. Is my favorite scene in the entire film, what I think encompasses the film, is the apartment scene when it's Dracula versus Renfield, and they're having that conversation, because we really get to the core of what their relationship is. And it's just brilliantly directed, brilliantly acted. All of it's beautiful. But it seems that throughout a lot of your films, you have this interesting knack of tackling complicated, nuanced relationships. I think about Tomorrow War and Pratt's character and his daughter, and how complicated that is. I think about Lego Batman, not only Batman and Robin, but also Batman and the Joker. I think about, 2 Weeks, 1 Year is about a relationship falling apart. So is that the thing that to you defines drama, is those complicated relationships?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I think probably I like genre movies so much. I want to make genre movies for the rest of my life. I love horror, I love action, I love sci-fi, I love fantasy. I love combinations of those things. Blade Runner, film noir, and science fiction and stuff like that. Like there's some of my movies that are sort of like mash up hybrids of things are some of my favorite stuff. A horror movie and a war movie with aliens and that sort of thing. But I think that I like my favorite genre movies are movies that also have a compelling human story. And I grew up on 90s indie movies and stuff like that. Like those were the other, besides James Cameron and Steven Spielberg and John Carpenter and George Romero and all these other film, Ridley Scott and people like that. I also grew up on Allison Anders and Desert Hearts and movies that came out in the late 80s, early 90s, mid 90s. Hal Hartley movies and Lodge Kerrigan movies and stuff like that. That dealt with oftentimes dealt with and going back to before my time, but Cassavetes movies and early Scorsese and everything else. But like those looking at people who are dealing with something or struggling with big emotional stakes, like things where they really am I a good person or not, when you're talking about like the stuff behind Tomorrow War, was about what if you saw what kind of shitty person you were in the future. I mean, there were some script changes and stuff like that ended up happening that just sort of took some of that stuff out of the movie, but that's what attracted me to that movie. And Chris and Yvonne did a beautiful job in those scenes, and Betty Gilpin did a wonderful job and stuff that never made it into the movie. But there was some really wonderful stuff in that family dynamic, and that's what was really appealing about can you do a sci-fi It's a Wonderful Life?
Yeah.
I mean, I'd still like to try to pursue that subject. Like if you saw a version of yourself, or you saw your future in some way, and because I think people, when they're confronted, that people don't oftentimes don't realize that maybe they're the bad guy in a movie.
Yeah.
Sometimes until later on in their lives,
Yeah.
when they look back on it, they're like, "Oh, wait a minute, I wasn't the bad. I wasn't in the right in any of that. How could I be? How could I have been so wrong? How could I have been so wrong about my, where I thought that I stood? And I think that it's stuff like that I think it's stuff that about real human beings that I want to try to put in these movies as much as possible can. Toxic relationships and workplace stuff, and why we work for bad people, and why we, there's a really great NPR did this thing where they were talking to people who worked for, I think it was Scott Rudin, and they were just talking about what it was like, work in that environment and why people stuck with it. And obviously there's reasons to stick with it. They're, financial or something, but it's also like they thought that maybe he was trying to bring the best out of them, or, they were sort of, excusing that, but also kind of like, it felt like they sort of deserved it maybe or something. And there's just like a lot of stuff going on there that, I want to try to see if there's a possibility of finding time in movies like this, because I think, even just a germ of that in the movie, I think people, might find these characters a little bit more relatable, and have the movie be a little more relatable, a little bit more about something else. And it's, it's tough to sneak in a big, Hollywood, studio movie, but that's the stuff that I think, if you can do that, if you hit that sweet spot, I mean, that's, that to me is like, that's what can light the world on fire, because I think you can make, those ideas, you can make Dracula a metaphor for something, that's real and personal to people, especially something that's contemporary as, toxic workplace stuff and narcissism, and, it's not Me Too, but it's like Me Too adjacent, it's like that kind of, kindness and, sort of people who sort of cruelty is the point of their existence maybe, or something, and dealing with that. I mean, that to me is like, that's something that could be really interesting, and was what, attracted me to the idea of trying to do something with Renfield and trying to touch on, at the very least, touch on a little bit. And that's also why with the Coda people, the group therapy stuff, I never, it's so easy in a comedy to turn those people into jokes. And I was always, the thing I was tried to make sure that we never did was, Renfield can have an attitude about codependency. He can have the group therapy, codependent meetings or affirmations. He can have an attitude like about that in the beginning of the movie, because that could show his growth. But what the filmmaker should never feel like is that they're punching down on those people, making fun of those people in any way. And that's the thing that I really want to make sure. It's like, we didn't have jokes that just like single them out as like weak or silly or something like that, that they all felt, as real as possible and had real pain, as well as, the jokes can kind of come out of some of the situational things, but never jokes about those people. And comedy's got to punch up, not punch down. And that was important to me. So that's why I kind of ran those scenes like a play. I had 3 or 4 cameras going and just kind of like did the whole 10-minute chunk. Just ran like a play so that everyone was kind of engaged in the scene, and it also kind of keeps everyone on their toes, because when you got 3 or 4 cameras going, the camera could be on you at any moment, at any time. And I've got, I've used, all practical lighting, because I, you just put the lighting in the set, so there was no like, basically other than the footprint of the crew, the camera could literally go almost anywhere, because there's no lighting, flags, anything. It's all, was top down, or some stuff that's when we did close-ups, bringing something in really tight. But that was, wanted to make sure, I wanted to try to run that as a play so that it felt real, felt as honest as possible.
I love that. And it forces you also as an actor to stay committed, because there's no, a lot of times in stage, we have a safe space is what we call it. So I can turn here if I have to sneeze or whatever. But if the cameras are all around you, you don't have that in any way. And I think it reminds me of two Hitchcock quotes. Hitchcock was talking about, someone asked him once boldly about the Ed Gein connection to Psycho. And he said that people look for the honesty in their films. And so if they know that part of this is based on a true story or something they can relate to, it connects them instantly. And that idea of the same complicated emotions that we go through being, in this spectacle of these mythical characters of Dracula and Renfield, it gives us an anchor point. But then also, Hitchcock's big thing was, if I'm going to scare you, I have to make you chuckle too. I have to bring that levity and release. And you have such a wonderful connection to comedy from your days in Robot Chicken, from Moral Oral, the last pizza commercial with Superman himself. I love all of those things. How important. Told you I did my research.
Dude, oh my God.
How important is it for you to let that comedy foster, and to let it occur within these films?
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to. You talk about spectacle. The spectacle where it's like, Tomorrow War, you got people raining out of the sky, or giant battles with aliens, stuff like that. And then there's emotional spectacle. That's a you gotta. I think you have to have a create something that's emotionally dramatic and interesting and has dynamism. But that's just one. Those are two aspects of like a full buffet. And in any movie, I feel like there has to be some levity. Like there has to be moments of levity for me to feel like it's a complete buffet. So I want to put the spectacle up there as much as possible, as much as the budget will allow, much of the concept in the budget will allow, and then also emotional spectacle, and then make sure that there's moments where it's treacle cutters, try to cut the drama with a little bit of funny, or it's having something that's like so honest. And because again, comedy's got to come out of the situation or the characters, the conflict. It can't be something that's imported in. Sometimes that's where stuff goes wrong, or sometimes people bring comedy in. That's when studios do rewriting things and stuff like that, where they just sort of import comedy. And seeing the best comedy, the comedy that's evergreen comedy, is the stuff that's going to come out of the character, situation, the conflict. And so you try to it's hiring Sam Richardson in Tomorrow War,
absolutely,
and having him just be the voice of Chris Pratt's the guy that's the hero, and he's got his own story and stuff like that, and he's got a military guy, so clearly he is a line drive down the middle for the role that he has to play in that movie. And you need somebody in there who provides the voice and the opinion of the everyman, and can while Chris Pratt's blowing away white spikes, Sam Richards can be running down the stairwell yelling shit while he's being chased by a white spike, and just kind of bring because again, you build all the suspense, you build all this stuff up that then it release it with the action, and the what the fuck is about to happen, and then you add a little bit of comedy to that. And I think the one underrated thing about a guy like Christopher Nolan, I think, is that people say his movies are all really serious and all this stuff, but I think he understands this. I think there's moments of really great comedy in his movies, whether it's Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Tom Hardy in Inception, or the stuff between Michael Caine and Christian Bale and Morgan Freeman and Christian Bale in the Batman movies. There's some really funny moments there, and really it's just and it's not something that people talk about a lot, but I really feel like that's one of his really great gifts, is by allowing movies like that could be, because we've seen the self-serious versions of those movies that don't have anything funny, and they're not as fun or as compelling. And I think the more you can bring a full buffet to the audience and find moments of levity, I think that's I'm not even sure I want to just do comedies as much as I want there to be comic moments in movies, because I think that honestly, that's the stuff that just ends up playing more, and it's more it's memorable. I mean, E.T. isn't a comedy, but there's stuff that's super funny
and those
in that movie, and really charming.
And those moments sort of help you define those characters too. And I feel like, especially with the Nolan films, I think that's such a great point. So much of the comedy in his films comes from how these characters relate to one another. I think about
Yeah.
Michael Caine and Christian Bale on the airplane. And when,
Yeah,
Caine puts his
yeah. He
glasses
took
on.
Batman Begins. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
Yeah,
that's such
yeah, of
a
course.
but it shows you the dynamics of who they are as people, and it gives these amazing actors this chance to sort of explore different realms of the character, which brings me to some of the amazing casting that you've been doing in these movies. Whether
Starts with Keith Brooks. Hey, and by the way, let's talk about just for 1 second. For 1 second, I'm going to talk about. So you auditioned for Tomorrow War. It was the first time I saw you. The first time I met you.
Yeah.
And you did such a good job. There was a part I really wanted, like, as much as humanly possible. I mean, this was sort of a naive on my part, but I really wanted as much of, like, even though the Army of the Ordinary wasn't going to last for very long in the movie, I really wanted to try to Frank Capra as much as possible. So I wanted to put like as many people in there. And I think there was a part that you auditioned for, one of the sort of there's some stuff that ended up getting kind of cut out as we were sort of figuring out the budget of this movie, because we were I got hired like 4 or 5 months before we were going to shoot this thing, so we had to like cast this thing really fast and that sort of thing. But you did such a good job in your audition, and you were so like real and funny, like super funny, but also like really real. And I was just like, I got to put this guy in the movie no matter what, like just any just anything, because I thought you were just so good. And then you came on to Renfield, and you were so like, you did such a good job. Your improvs were great. You brought a lot. The other thing is, I really wanted somebody who's gonna be memorable, because obviously there's a lot of Doug is trash and other stuff that relates to who this Doug guy is, and I needed this guy to be memorable. And you did such a good job. And yeah, you really are a wonderful actor. And
well, you're a wonderful
I really mean
director.
it. I want us to keep working together. So you're gonna be in everything. So
music to my ears. I love it, and thank you. You've made my heart grow 17 sizes.
Just like the Grinch.
Just like the Grinch. I've even got the green complexion up here too.
Yeah.
But aside from me, you're the one that gave us Nicolas Cage as Dracula. You gave us Billy D. Williams as Two-Face officially. Like, how does it feel?
Yeah.
Because I also know you, and I know you're a movie fan. How does it feel to have these people play these iconic characters that I know you're also a fan of the character? What's that like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the best. I've got a front row seat. The best seat in the house for watching all that stuff. Yeah, Billy D. He was blown away when he came on to Lego Batman and came to the voiceover booth. He goes, "Is this because I played Harvey Dent in that movie that they didn't? I didn't get to do the Two-Face thing." And I was like, "Yep, absolutely, exactly why we're doing this." And he was great. Loved hanging out with him. Hung out with him a very short time. Just did like a couple of sessions, but he was awesome. But yeah, I mean, you get to work with all these amazing people, comedy heroes and acting heroes, and also try to find people that maybe I saw Yvonne and who played Chris Pratt's daughter in the future in Tomorrow War. I saw her in so many things. Like, I just remember like seeing her like in the Shane Black Predator movie.
Yeah.
And she's just got a bit part in that movie. And I was just like, man, she is so good. And every time I saw her in something, I was like, wow, she is so good. Like, I'm not saying that movie's bad. I'm just saying, like, sometimes she's like the best part of any movie she's in, even when she's in like a really small part. And so when it came time to like cast that part, and she's one of the people that I wanted to look at, because it's like, she's always giving 1,000,000% in everything she does. She's so real. She can do, she can be funny at times, and she's also cool
An
and
action
badass,
star.
and is not
Yeah.
isn't allergic to doing stunts and things like that. So like, being able to use her in the same, like being able to have fun with Aquafina, who's not necessarily, she certainly isn't a stunt person and more in her other roles, but having her come in and like get into the stunt training and gun training and that sort of thing. And she was like, she was doing, like mag changes and things like that. She was like really like I was really impressed. Like all the stuff she got her kicks like really high. The first kick she throws in the movie, she got it really high up there, and it's just cool. It's like fun to be able to like play around with people like that who maybe don't get to do that sort of thing, but get to have fun with it. And she's, she and Holt were so charming together, and
Yeah.
had a lot of really great chemistry. And that first, right after that restaurant scene, they just the two of them were so. There's some stuff, a little bit of stuff that got cut out or kind of got upcut a little bit in that scene, but like, she's like, there's so much charm that both of those guys layered on in that scene, and it just makes you want to go with them. And so, I got, getting over with Cage, like I just, like I said, I've got the best seat in the house. I couldn't be more lucky or privileged to be able to do, this sort of thing. I really love actors. Look at Shore. Like Shore I've loved in so many things.
Incredible.
Like I
That
just,
voice. Oh God.
yeah. But like I remember seeing her in House and Sand and Fog, and just
Yeah.
like, and she worked with, Kiarostami and people like that. Like she's just like, she's amazing. And, she's somebody that I've always wanted to work with. And, I just, I'm fortunate that I get to be able to cast people, and I get to sort of put these wish lists together, and just even adding people like Caroline Williams or William Ragsdale, or, Jenna, who, was in the Terrifier stuff and things like that. Like being able to, just like people like that, like, it's just like, oh, how can I, show, I mean, believe me, I would have put, way more people who are from whole or horror movies, old and new, in this movie if I'd been able to do what I wanted to do. It should have been chock full of of people like that, and I would have loved to have worked with. But all day on set, I'm just asking Cage about, like, what was it like working with Martin Scorsese? What was it like working with Brian De Palma? What was it like, like working with David Lynch? Just like, I just kept asking, like, let's talk about Wild at Heart. Let's talk about, It Could Happen to You. All these things. Like, just because it just, I love hearing the old stories. I love, being able to work with someone who's got such a, again, his tool set is just incredible. Both Nicks, they're incredible. Just a bag of tricks, and just, just a lot of really great experience in front of camera, and being able to do shorthand, character shorthand, and just had wonderful instincts, and just sit with them in a room and rehearse and talk about stuff, and it's just talk about the characters and the backstory and that sort of thing. I mean, we didn't really have much of a rehearsal. We never, it's almost like you never get rehearsal on these things, but like being able to sit with, in between, like those guys doing some stunt training and stuff like that, we're able to kind of sit in the office and just kind of go through a couple of the key scenes, especially like, the apartment scene between the two of them and that sort of thing. Like being able to, sit there and kind of like work through those beats and stuff like that, it's a real gift. And those guys are so generous and giving, giving on, to everyone in the scene, giving as far as just being good people to the crew, and good, just a great experience. I've been very lucky, knock on wood, that I've had, zero sort of like, problems with any actors. They've all been really beautiful people. And
well, I think it's also because you're so giving in the way you keep your set, you allow for that room for experimental, discovery. You know what I mean? Even with the Doug and the ska band stuff, you gave us plenty of leeway to play with stuff. I was listening to Ben Schwartz talk the other day about how he's never got to do some of the stuff that you allowed him to do, and that's awesome. It's I think that's what excites an actor is, oh, I've never got to play like this before. And so even watching it, Cage doing Dracula stuff that I've never seen him do in any of his movies. And you would think like, oh, well, David Lynch let him do the weirdest stuff. No, it's you. You let him do. But here's the other
I'm pretty sure Mandy. I mean, there's other things.
But it's one of my favorite things about the directors I love. You can tell they're a fan of the subject matter or a film in general, whether it's Scorsese, you can tell where he's pulling shots from. Tarantino, you can tell it. I was talking to Casper Kelly about his movie Yule Log, and it's like, I know this is Phantasm, and I love you paying homage to it. And so with yours, I feel it's even more direct, where Lego Batman movie feels like it's a love letter to the concept of Batman. And this feels like it's a love letter to Dracula himself, because we have London After Midnight costumes. We have things from Hammer. We literally go back to the 1930s. And I feel like with everything you do, you're treating it with such love. Is that a significant thing for you, or is that me just reading too much into it while I'm high? Talk to me about
No, that's it could be a little bit of both.
Okay, good.
Well, in general, I want to treat as many things with love as possible. I mean, don't do anything you don't love. Don't jump into something, especially something like this, where you got to love the material, you got to love something about it. It could be, the colors, could be the cinematography, it could be the actors, could be whatever. But you got to love, some aspect of this thing, because I think that the DNA of that gets baked into the movie. The DNA of whether people are having a good time on set gets baked into the movie,
Yeah.
So I want to, so try to treat as much stuff with love. But I love Batman. Batman was like my, the thing when I was a kid. Like that was,
Yeah.
I was because I, grew up at a certain point, like, Super Friends and all of that stuff, kind of, Batman showing up like on Scooby-Doo reruns and stuff like that, all kind of came at the right time when I was a little kid for me to be interested in Batman Robin or the reruns of the Adam West stuff. And then like when I started to kind of get more aware of comic books, the Frank Miller graphic novels came along. And so then I had sort of an age up version, of Batman to go to. And then there's the Keaton movies and the Nolan movies and stuff like that. And so I was fortunate that at each stage of my life, there was something about that character that kind of like aged up maybe with me. And that's still why I'm a little bit obsessed with like kind of this Nightwing movie, because I just, Robin was this character that was sort of a joke when you're a kid, but then he kind of becomes his own, superhero. And you kind of got to, as I grew up, he, sort of grew up. And that's still something why, still why, feel something for that character and want to do something with that. But like, and horror movies and Universal, monsters and Dracula, vampire movies, those things were big for me, all my life. I saw the Christopher Lee Hammer movie on this TV station when I grew up in Chicago. They do a week of certain movies, and they did a Hammer week. I'm sure they didn't advertise it as that, but it was just like it's the 3:30 movie when I got home from school was like. It was Horror of Dracula, and it was the Oliver Reed Wolfman movie, and Christopher Lee as the mummy and stuff like that. And so I got to see all those movies when I was a little kid, and I was constantly going to the library and like studying, reading books on movies and movie history and these movie characters and stuff like that, and was just kind of obsessive about that. And so yeah, these characters have been with me, and then the filmmakers, when I went to high school, the films that I liked were John Carpenter movies and George Romero movies and David Cronenberg and James Cameron and all the Joe Dante, Steven Spielberg, huge like Spielberg fan, and Spielberg directs everything like a horror movie. Everything he does is like, it's just like it's all like whether he's doing Color Purple or whether he's doing E.T. or whether he's doing Raiders. It's just he just understands that, the idiom of a horror movie so well. And he uses that sometimes for comic effect, like in different movies, or just sort of like to create a sense of unease and tension. Obviously he's like incredible with suspense. I mean, it's just like, he's like, I mean, he's that guy. He's so everything he does is inspiring me. And it's one of those, I think people sort of forget to put him on the list, but it's like, because he's done so many movies and just such a part of us now, as
we take him for granted,
like,
almost,
Yeah, 1,000,000%, 1,000,000%. And everything that he does, whether you like the movies that he does or not, or whether you track with them, there's so many complicated things that he's doing, and so many efficient things he's doing as a filmmaker, that it's easy to take him for granted because he has such a light touch and it's so beautifully done. Every movie, pick the Spielberg movie you like the least, and it's got 1,000,000 things that it can teach you in it. I mean, he's just one of those guys, and then Joe Dante is one of those guys that people don't talk about as much anymore, but it's just like everything that guy did, was so good. The low budget stuff when he had a budget, it's just, he's just, yeah. I mean, I feel really lucky that to have lived through a time where had so many great, and Scorsese, like all these guys that just, I know everyone talks about Scorsese and stuff like that, but it's just another guy who's just got just incredible, and the diverse body of his work too, is just like incredible.
and he's just the guy that gets it. Like, it's all three of these, they understand the medium and are constantly pushing themselves. Like, with Spielberg, I love Spielberg. Scorsese's one of my favorites. Lynch, Hitchcock, McKay. But I think with Spielberg, I expected to hate The Fabelmans because I thought it was just going to be very self-serving, and then
Sure.
I was blown away by it. It was one of
Yeah.
it's I think one of his best movies ever. And when I first read Tomorrow War, I'm like, well, this is Spielberg meets James Cameron. Like, that's what this is.
Yeah.
Yet that is so drastically different than what Renfield is. And it feels like you're following that. I want every project to feel like takes place in a completely different world. And
Yeah.
yet still masterful in your filmmaking, which brings me to this idea and this question. You really cut your teeth on editing. You're a winner of the Eddie Award, which is an award given to editors. Thus, Eddie. How do you feel that impacts your directorial toolkit? Are you directing for the edit? And if you're not involved with the edit, is it easy for you to let go since that was a huge part of your life for a long time? I'm sorry, that's a complicated question.
It's a question in two parts. I think probably when editing was a very practical thing for me to get into because I wanted to work probably at I wanted to work at a really high level in the film industry, and I didn't like it's tough to it's tough to obviously just break in and just be a director.
Yeah.
And so editing was a way of working, working with this, the story of the movie or whatever project, the music video or the commercial or whatever the project is that you're working on. It's the way of working through all of that, all of the, storytelling problems with with the producers and the director and that sort of thing. And so I looked at that as a way to kind of get an education really fast and get to, learn as much as possible. You get to, the editing, you get to, really understand. I got to see other people, for lack of a better way of putting it, but I got to see other people like make their mistakes, and got to live through their mistakes. And I think mistakes are good. I think fucking up is good. I think failing is good. It's the Pixar thing. You got to fucking fail fast. You gotta,
I don't think Pixar says fucking, but yes, that's what
they probably don't say fuck, at least it's not in public, but yeah, you got to fail as often as fast as you can, so that you can, really learn as much about what your story needs and what your characters need and what the audience needs.
Yeah.
So being able to work in an edit suite, to work on independent films, because I did a lot of editing of independent films in Chicago. I started my own editing business when I was like 25 years old. And I had been doing training tapes for doctors and nurses and things like that at a healthcare company. And they were about to get rid of their creative services department. So I took out a loan and bought their Avid and, got some production insurance so I could, so that we could, make, music videos and commercials and do sales meetings, training tapes and other things like that. And so, but at night I, would do, low budget independent films that were being shot in Chicago, and with one, one of them got to go to Sundance and another one got to go to, Slam Dance and other film festivals and things like that. And so I got to see I got to see filmmakers sort of like work through their assumptions, right? Because you get to see what people are, the assumptions they made, and then how the rubber met the road once they got on set, and then try to help them either get back to their assumptions, that they made, to see if there's a way to salvage that and see if there's a way to make that happen, whether that's, adding lines of dialogue or omitting things or rearranging some scenes or whatever tools, you come up with, or come up with a new way of, well, now that you've got this and you've got this, so you've got an A and a B, so how do you bridge those two things? How do you get to this thing here that may be a new way of doing something that you hadn't thought of before, or going on, helping reshoot stuff or things like that for storytelling purposes. So I got to be a part of that at a very early age, and that was very informative. And then I went out and made my own thing and got to make a bunch of mistakes and learn a lot about, I think the key thing is you gotta learn about who you are as a filmmaker. Like, go out there and make stuff so that if you think you're a comedy guy and it's not, and everything you're turning out is like incredibly dramatic and nothing's there's nothing super funny about it. That's a good lesson to learn. That's a really good lesson to learn. And you got to be open. You got to be open to that. Maybe you think, I think John Landis, I remember something about John Landis when the first movie he made, he thought he was making a horror movie. And then, but everything, and this is pre American Werewolf in London. I think it's a movie called Schlock. He was saying something about, I thought we were making a horror movie, but then once I saw the dailies and everything, it was just so funny that I was like, wait a minute, maybe I'm a comedy director and I'm not a horror movie. I'm not going to be an exploitation horror movie director. I'm going to be a comedy director. Figured out what he was good at. I would argue that American Werewolf is also a very good horror movie too.
Yeah.
But I'm sure maybe he learned, from that first experience, what to take away. But yeah, I think you gotta figure out who you are as a filmmaker. But I guess probably why I want, and that's probably why I do a lot of a variety of things, is because I learned a lot editorially about, maybe how to sort of protect myself in the edit. That's probably why there's certain things where I'm like, I want to try it a little bit this way and then a little bit that way, to give myself a little bit of some things to play with. Like, okay, that might be taken a little bit too serious or that, so let's try to bring it, let's try to take it back a little bit, or add something to the end to sort of help, take the air out of it a little bit. Yeah. But I also like want to challenge myself with different. I think that's the thing, is I want to challenge. Like, I keep wanting to take on something that's hard, or something that's new, or something that's at least original, because I want to keep trying different things so that I grow more as a filmmaker. Everything, there will be a day where I'll get pigeonholed in something, and that will be, forever my epitaph as far as my career goes, is that he's this guy or that guy or whatever. But as much as I can right now, I want to try to take on as many new things, many original things, as humanly possible, so that I can just figure out like what I'm really good at, and work with as many interesting people as possible. I want to, absorb as much knowledge as I can, because you don't learn unless you're doing it, and then so you got to get on a set and you got to do it. You got to make as many things you can, and try as many things you can. So while I'm still not quite pigeonholed as one thing, I'm going to try to do as many different things as possible.
I love that. I love that. The best answer in the world. And I love that attitude. I think I feel a kinship with that. I don't want to be seen as just this one thing. Let me branch out and keep trying. And by that challenge, we're forging ourselves by fire, right? That idea.
Yeah.
With so much. So on that, Tim Burton once said that when he first started directing live action, everyone kept referring to him as the animation guy. And you have a history of animation. Did you feel that going into that? Has that dissipated at all? How do you feel about that?
I think, like animations, I think every filmmaker should do do a short, do a feature. Every filmmaker should try to work in animation, because you learn a lot about storytelling. You learn about packing the frame with as much information about your character or your movie, your tone, your plot as humanly possible. Yeah. Because, it's, you're doing feature animation, unless you figured out, especially in the CG world, you're spending, close to $1 million a minute, so you got to make sure that every, that's why Pixar movies are so good. They spend so much time just trying to make sure that every frame, every choice that they're making gives you as much information, as much bang for their buck as humanly possible. And that's a great, and being able to do storytelling in slow motion, because it's obviously, you're not on set, you're not burning, the money you're burning, you're building this stuff all the time. You're building a reel with storyboards, and you're building a reel with layout, and you're building a reel with animation. Then you're, and then you're kind of flowing. Sometimes animation is only getting to a point, so you throw it back to layout to do a few things, and then you bring it back to animation, or you go into lighting and realize something's not working, and then you bring it back. So you're always you're building each of those scenes, one step at a time. And so hopefully, again, I think that process of animation makes I think people better storytellers, and hopefully better filmmakers, and writers like that. If you pay attention to the process, it will.
Yeah, I mean, it really also forces you to think about every conscious aspect of what's happening. You know, I direct films and edit as well. Not as successful, but I do it, and I find that when I'm editing, you know, I know this movie better than anybody else because I've stared at every single frame. So I know, oh, the coffee cup moved in the wrong place. And
Yeah.
that's always going to bother me, but it gives you an eyesight of the film that nobody else is going to have. And I imagine animation is that times a million because you're
Yeah.
literally constructing everything. But speaking of
Yeah.
constructing things, this month is just huge for you. Not only Renfield, but also story credit for D&D, which you did with your longtime collaborator Michael Gilio, I think is his name,
Mike
who
Gilio, yeah,
Gilio,
Gilio, yeah,
who was in 2
yeah,
Weeks, 1 Year, your first film, and you also edited Quick Stop, his film, and
yeah.
worked on Dungeons and Dragons together. So is this just everybody high-fiving you as you're walking down the street this month, or how does it feel with
I'm not sure if a lot of people know that I worked on the Dungeons and Dragons, or Crystal Cage is kind of a common name too. I get, you know, I probably get more people asking me when Step Brothers 2 is going to happen, you know, than you know, what's happening on Dungeons and Dragons. But yeah, Mike's a wonderful writer. I was very fortunate, you know, to you know, talk to Paramount about doing Dungeons and Dragons. You know, other than film, when I was a kid, the thing I was most obsessed with was Dungeons and Dragons. Like, film was, you know, number one. And then when, you know, some kids came along and were playing Dungeons and Dragons, and I saw that and I was like, wait a minute, there's a game where you make up the story and you do all this stuff, and it's not all like, you know, you roll the dice and it's these really elaborate sort of, you know, stories you're sort of all creating and these characters you're creating. I mean, that was, you know, my mind was fucking blown. And I, you know, so I was really lucky that they came along and, you know, asked me to do it. And you know, the first person I thought of was Mike, because Mike's an incredible writer, incredible, thoughtful writer, and also kind of, you know, has the same sort of comic sensibilities. And you know, we wanted to make, basically, we want to make a heist movie. We want to make it feel like a heist movie as much as possible.
Yeah.
And so I think the DNA of that's, you know, in you know, the final film. But I, you know, because we were very aware that, like, when you have a property like Dungeons and Dragons, it can be a double-edged sword, because, like, the people that know it are going to want to show up, but people that don't only know it by reputation and have not really, don't really know what it is, might think they need to do homework before they come in to see something like this. Like, is this going to be something like Game of Thrones, where I got to know something about the background, or Lord of the Rings, something like that, you know, where I gotta know something. And so I was like, look, start with making this a heist movie first, like, and then, you know, let's layer in, you know, bugbears and owl bears and gelatinous cubes and mind flayers and every other thing that we know we're gonna do. I mean, you know, the first thing I did was like, let's make this script, you know, this kind of fun, you know, heist movie, while at the same time sending the design team off and go, give me the coolest dragons, give me the coolest, you know, gelatinous cube, you can do whatever. Like, so those two things were on a collision course, the most accessible thing and the most, like, Easter egg thing in the world.
But I think that's your filmmaking, successful Easter
Yeah.
eggs. That's what you do.
Yes. But you know, I was doing Dungeons and Dragons, sort of, you know, sort of developing that at the same time I was developing Borderlands for Lionsgate, which is a video game adaptation of you know, which that Craig Mazin wrote the script for, did a really great job. And so I was doing those two things at the same time, and then Tomorrow War came along, and I sort of had, in Tomorrow War was, you know, again, something that was a moving train, something that the studio had developed without, you know, they didn't develop that with the director. They just had a script, and they had an actor, and they had a window for Chris Pratt, and they were like, can you come on this movie and in 5 months start shooting this movie and put this whole thing together? And so I was like, yeah, I mean, I love working with Chris and wanted to do, you know, big sci-fi movie. And so I was like, yes, please let me do this thing. And so then, you know, so then Borderlands, they went off and made that movie with Eli Roth. You know, Dungeons and Dragons, the Gold Team Daily came along and did a great job. I'm a huge fan of Game Night, and they you know, they were really nice to be able to sort of let Mike and I, you know, have a story by credit, because that's really generous of them, because that's not always, you know, the
Yeah.
case, and Mike and I are just thrilled that they, because I mean they the whole graveyard scene where they're doing the questioning the guy in the graveyard is like straight out of, and that was the stuff that we were doing in our
That's awesome.
script, was that kind of like ridiculous stuff.
That's-
Because again, I wanted part of it, it wanted to be a heist movie, but I also wanted to feel like the feeling of improv when you are playing with your friends, and the kinds of like, silly things that end up happening when you're playing with friends, and getting into the game kind of takes on a life of itself, especially if you got a good DM. So that wanted to feel like that, and so I'm really happy that we got to be a part of that movie. And again, that was really just really sweet of the guys to acknowledge us, and especially Mike, because Mike, I wrote a treatment, and Mike went off and wrote a script, and did it fleshed out and did an incredible job. So it was really nice of those guys and those guys obviously came in and took that, and then brought it to life, and had to deal with all the stuff that the behind the scenes stuff you never have to see about having to deal with all the different parties, and all to deal with all of the budget and things like that, and no matter what the number is on a budget, there's still never enough, and there's so they had to make a lot of decisions and figure out how to make a movie work, with limitations they had to. So yeah, huge hats off to those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And huge hats off to just the creativity and the versatility of your career so far. Look, I know I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I will say, normally I don't like watching anything I'm in. I feel like if they've cast me, they've really gone downhill already. But I loved Renfield. I had such a blast as a horror fan, as a comedy fan, just watching these actors work. I think you really just nailed it. And every filmmaker I've talked to has said that movie's really tight, and that's the best filmmaker compliment ever. Is it doesn't overstay its welcome. It's not lacking anything. It's just a perfect length, and everything I need is right there. And just a master of tone. Just a great, phenomenal job, man.
Thanks, Keith.
Oh, you're very welcome. But before you go, I have two things I have to ask of you. The second one is you got to tell me a joke. But the first one is I need to know your 5 favorite movies. What are the 5 movies that you just love? It don't have to be your favorite, but ones that you want to tell the world,
Yeah. Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind is a movie I go back to a lot. I really love that movie. I think it's Michel Gondry's
amazing.
It's my favorite Michel Gondry movie. It's my favorite Charlie Kaufman movie, or maybe his adaptation is real close. But I really love them. I love the performances. I think it's Jim Carrey's, for my money, it's Jim Carrey's best performance. I think it's really it's just such an emotional movie. I get really emotional watching that movie. I love the music, John Bryan's score and stuff like that. There's just so much about that movie that I love. That's probably one of my favorite movies.
Right.
And then it's tough because I've got so many. Then I've got so many genre movies that are like my favorite movies of all time. It's tough for me to pick a Carpenter movie. It's tough for me to pick a Spielberg movie, because there's so many of them I watch over and over again and I love. But if I had to rattle off 5 movies that I probably watch a lot, Rio Bravo is a movie that I watch a lot. Big Sleep is a big Howard Hawks fan.
Yeah.
Notorious, Alfred Hitchcock's Notorious, a movie I'm sort of obsessed with.
Yeah.
And it's one of the first, it's definitely the first Hitchcock movie I saw. But it's one of the first movies that really, as a kid who was getting interested in movies, and because I was obsessed about reading about these movies, and he had this list of movies that I wanted to see. When I finally got to see that movie, I was just blown away by it. I'm also a big Rear Window guy.
Yeah.
I really love Rear Window. To have Eternal Sunshine, Rio Bravo, Notorious, Big Sleep. Oh yeah, I guess I got I guess I've already done 5, and I could probably keep going. But yeah, but those are movies that I definitely watch a lot, and I'm just enjoy watching them. There's so many more, and then recently too, there's been a lot of movies. Like I really love Top Gun Maverick. I thought those guys did such a good job.
I haven't seen. I've never seen the original Top Gun, but I will one day. I will see. I'll have a weekend of Top Gunning. I guess I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can definitely watch the first movie, and I mean, Tony Scott's an amazing director. There's a lot of movies of his I think are really, really watchable, and
Yep.
Ridley Scott too. Obviously, you love Blade Runner.
Yeah,
but I almost don't know if you need to watch the first movie because if you've probably absorbed enough of it via pop culture.
Yeah.
That you don't like if for some reason you're allergic to watching both of those movies for whatever, there's no shame, there's nothing wrong with that. But like I think you can honestly watch Top Gun Maverick. I think Top Gun Maverick is actually, this is probably the something I'd be crucified for saying. I think the Top Gun Maverick is a better movie than I was gonna say. I was trying to like.
I hear a lot of people. I hear a lot of people say it. Go ahead.
It's really well done.
Yeah,
I was just saying it's really well done.
Yeah, one day I know I'm going to be in the mood. I'm going to be like, I want to watch a lot of people play volleyball, and that will be the day I watch both of them. I think, you know what I mean?
Sure.
But I just haven't.
There's only volleyball. There's only volleyball in one of them. There's only volleyball.
Oh, okay. Only the first one. Okay, gotcha.
Only the first one has volleyball. Yeah.
Okay.
The second one has a football on the beach.
Oh, okay.
Different sport. Yeah. The next one is going to be curling. But the thing is, like, if you do see Top Gun Maverick, try to see it in the biggest screen humanly possible.
Okay. Yeah, I hear it's mesmerizing.
Yeah, cinematography alone is and the way they put it together is and Lorne Balfe, who I love. Lorne Balfe did with Hans Zimmer did the score.
Oh.
For that, and so he I love Lorne, so yeah, he did an awesome job, and he does all all the latest McQuarrie Mission Impossible movies. So his scores were phenomenal.
That's awesome, and so thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in to Chris McKay Plugs Top Gun Maverick. But before you go, I need to hear. Give me a joke, sir.
Okay, a joke. All right. What do you call a crazy rooster?
What?
A kookle-doodle-doo. I can't even do it straight face. The dumbest joke in the world. A kookle-doodle-doo. I fucked up this dumb joke. I like it. I like it so much.
That was amazing. That's my favorite so far. And again, man, I can't thank you enough for coming, and I wish you all the best with Renfield premiering, and I just can't wait to see all the awards you're going to get, and all the praise is so deserved. And just call me for the next movie, and yeah, I can't wait.
Yeah, well, hopefully I'm going to take a trip over there to Atlanta, and you, me, and Josh, and Jenna, we'll get the Atlanta people all together, and we'll.
Hell yeah, man! I can't wait to sink my teeth into that. Thank you so much, Chris.
Thanks, Keith. Talk to you soon, man.
Would you like to introduce yourself to the group?
I'm the Prince of Malaysia. Some call me the Dark One. Others, the Lord of Death. However, to most, I am known simply as
Renfield's boss.
I am Dracula.
Okay, obviously we're dealing with a little bit more than just narcissism here.